Hey guys, it's Vince and Drew with Power 5 Fanatics going into week 3. And we just wanted to take a look back at the games from last week, and we're going to come up with our Power 5 Fanatics top 25 through week 2.
Right. And I think this was a good week to really get a good grasp of where some of these teams are. You know, you had obviously the big game between between LSU and Texas, and that showed us a lot about those two teams. And then we also had the other big game, which was A&M and Clemson, and so that
Had a couple other ones too. Maryland, Syracuse. I think we got a real good idea of especially where Maryland's at right now, and
Right.
we can talk about that and a lot of other things. We're just going to start from the top, and at no surprise, number one is going to be Clemson. As opposed to a lot of these schools, they did play a team that is very talented, especially defensively.
Yeah, I mean, A&M met them at their house this week, and they just, I don't want to say outclassed them, but they really beat them the way that they should beat them. I mean, the A&M defense hung in there with the Clemson offense, I thought, really well. I thought the defense played really good for A&M. But it was, the things, Clemson just, their presence, you could tell that they threw A&M off, and the better team just won that game, and they won it pretty convincingly. Of course, A&M did cover, but it was in the
last play of the
last
game.
second touchdown. But Clemson won pretty convincingly. So we got them at number one. We're keeping them there.
2, again, no surprise, Alabama, and they beat, I believe it was Murray. New Mexico State, and they beat them very convincingly. You would think the number 2 team in the nation would beat a team like New Mexico State.
Yeah, Bama hasn't had a chance to really play anyone good yet. They probably won't get that until we get to see them against maybe LSU. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're probably not going to be challenged a whole lot this season, but they're beating the teams the way they're supposed to. And I think their defense is a lot better than I thought it was going to be going into the season. They had a big-time injury with Dylan Moses in their linebacker core, and I think those young freshman linebackers have been more impressive than I thought they were going to be, and then they got an elite secondary as well. So just a great team right there, and they always are.
Tua played pretty good too, didn't he? Right. I don't even know if he played the fourth quarter or not, but that's pretty typical. 3, we have a new entry here, and we think they very much deserve it. LSU.
Right.
And Joe Burrow just played out of his mind. I mean, he's definitely in the Heisman Trophy consideration at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't the same old LSU, and that was one of our.
And let's be honest, that wasn't the same old Texas. I mean,
right.
I think this was kind of a benchmark type of game for these two programs. They were both, I don't want to say mirror images of each other, but they were very similar in the way that they like to play football. Burrow reminds me a lot of Ellinger, and to go into Austin and beat them was super impressive. And like Vince was saying, Burrow was unreal, and so was Ellinger. The defense, they gave up a lot of yards, but you could tell they had a ton of talent. This is one of those teams, to me, that has proved the most. I mean, of the top 10.
I agree. And like we were saying, I think last week I believe it was one of our one of our takes of the previous week.
Yeah.
The takeaway is that LSU's offense, it looks like it's for real. Well, they definitely confirmed it, and it's not the same old 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Right.
I mean, especially when they went for it on, or they didn't go for it, but
3rd and 17.
Yeah, 3rd and 17.
Yeah.
Typically you would think that's okay. We're going to do some type of screen pass or something, or a draw, and see what happens. But boy, they just went for the win, and they got it. And they just looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, and those receivers for LSU were very dominant as well. So I see the offensive dominance that they displayed on Saturday to continue down for the rest of the season.
We got Georgia at 4. Of course, they played Murray State and looked very good.
Right.
There's nothing that tells me they don't belong in the top 4.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, we got at 5. The only really, if you say, if you're going to critique them right now, I mean, it's still the defense is a little shaky maybe at times. They do have some good playmakers. They got the one linebacker,
Kenneth Murray.
Yeah, Kenneth Murray. It's very good. I'm not saying their defense isn't good at all, but it's the one thing you could say it could be a Achilles heel for them later on maybe. But that's Big 12 for you.
I think that they've taken some steps there on the defense, though. Like Vince was saying, Kenneth Murray looked really good. And I think they got a pretty good defensive line, an underrated defensive line. They got the senior Neville Gallimore, who is clogging up running lanes at defensive tackle. And they got a younger sophomore kid, Ronnie Perkins, on the end that I think is making plays. And then just what can you say about the offense? I mean, every year, they bring in a new quarterback. And
Jalen Hurts, he's still my Heisman, number one Heisman candidate at this point.
Right.
And because I think he's played better than anybody else. I mean, it's him and Tua, and there's 2 or 3 other ones, of course. But Jalen Hurts is just playing really better than I think anybody really thought he was going to. I mean, everybody thought he was going to be pretty good, but he's been excellent. At 6, we got Ohio State. And they blanked Cincinnati, which I thought was pretty impressive. And just when you thought maybe there might be a little slip up with Ohio State this year, doesn't look like a slip up to me. It looks they're back in that number 1 slot in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, we had Cincinnati in our top 25, I think, last week. Didn't we? I mean,
we did. Well, I think we had them at
around 23
or something.
So. And they beat UCLA, and UCLA's not a good team.
Yeah.
But they beat them, and they beat them 2 years in a row. And I think we picked them to cover the spread too, which I think was 17 points at Ohio State. Well, they didn't cover the spread. Ohio State beat them 42-0.
The thing about Ohio State, they seem, outside of Oklahoma, they seem to be the best program of basically plugging a new quarterback in, and where he doesn't just play at a manageable or playing good. They play great.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I think Oklahoma and Ohio State reflect each other really well, mirror images.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they both brought in a young offensive-minded coach and a new quarterback,
right?
And they haven't missed a beat.
But it seemed like they always have a great quarterback. Ohio State. 7, we got Michigan. We dropped them some. I've liked Michigan a lot since the preseason, but it is what it is. And until their offense can show some consistency, it looks pretty much like the old Michigan. And I know Army is not the easiest opponent in the world to beat, or of course they barely beat them. But anyways, they just. There's a lot of problems when you're trying to stop that triple option.
I think that as of right now, there's 6 teams that I think are what you consider elite, and it's the ones we just talked about.
Yeah.
And then there's a little gap there, and then there's Michigan in our next.
Yeah, that's where we're getting at now. We got Notre Dame. Of course, they were off this last week. We got them at 8. And then we dropped Texas
to number 9.
To 9. I mean, they seem to be definitely a quality program, and I mean, let's face it, they almost beat LSU, and so anyways, we got them still in the top 10. Penn State rounds out the top 10.
Right. And, I kind of expected Penn State to take a bit of a step back this year. I feel like, not that they're not a program where they're currently at where they can reload, but I felt like this was a season where they were maybe going to have to rebuild a little bit, and it seems like they're just reloading.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, their defensive line is absolutely dominant. They got a new running back in there who, they had Saquon Barkley a few seasons ago. They got another great running back in there. They had to replace their quarterback last year, McSorley, and it seems like they're doing a good job with it.
Yeah, their problem is the Big Ten just seemed to be really strong at the top and even in the middle.
It's just loaded.
Yeah, it's loaded, and that's going to be Penn State's problem, along with some of these other schools. And then we got our first group of 5 schools, UCF. We definitely believe they belong there because they've looked very solid.
Well,
beating Florida Atlantic.
Yeah, look, UCF beat Florida Atlantic worse than Ohio State beat Florida Atlantic.
Yeah.
Okay? They've been the class of the group of 5 for the past 2
Yeah, and they
seasons.
continue to be.
And they continue
without
to
a
put
doubt.
up points.
It's
Doesn't
really
matter.
not even a debate. I mean, with anybody else at this point.
They may not get a whole lot higher than that in our rankings unless they just continue to play great teams. They have a chance coming up. They get to play Stanford, who has looked up and down, but that's an opportunity for them to kind of prove that they can compete with these big programs, and they get to play Pitt, I believe, too, later in the season. If they,
they're going to have some
go
chances.
undefeated, I mean, again, you're going to have to look at this team as definitely.
It's gonna. They may have to have some help, but anything can happen. But so far, so good.
They definitely seem to be the New Year's Six favorite for that group of 5 slot. That will be in the bowl game during the bowl game season.
We got another SEC team now with Florida.
Right.
Of course, they beat University of Tennessee Martin pretty handedly.
And Florida, they haven't really had a chance to prove to me that they're up in that upper echelon just yet. That initial win when they played Miami looked really good, at least the optics of it before the season. But Miami's
it's
sitting
not
here
looking
now
not looking
0-2,
quite as good.
and they're not looking so good. So Florida, they're still 2-0. They're still undefeated, but I think they definitely have an opportunity to move up the boards quick though, because they got a rough schedule like a lot of these SEC programs. So we'll see where they end up.
At 13, we got what could end up being one of the best
The dark
teams.
horse programs
in the Big Ten. Wisconsin, they haven't given up a point. They're Jonathan Taylor's looking as good as you would expect him to. I think he has 6 touchdowns so far this year.
Right.
He had 20 all of last year, so he's probably going to bust that. And he may win the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah.
But it's just they look very complete. And I know we have we got 3 Big Ten schools in front of them, but that might not last for long. We'll see how it goes with them. But they've been, along with LSU, probably the 2 most impressive teams.
Right.
Maybe in Maryland also. You can include.
This team has outscored their opponents 110-0. They've not given up a point yet.
Yeah, that's hard
Their
to do.
defense is extremely hard. I know they haven't played anybody, but you can't. It's really hard to hold somebody to 0 points. And then, like Vince was saying, Jonathan Taylor is on his way to getting 6,000 career yards in his 3-year career. He won't be there next year. He's going to go to the NFL. But their defense looks dominant. It looks like they're starting to get a quarterback in Jack Cohn. And if that team gets a quarterback, watch out. They're definitely a dark horse in the Big Ten.
We finally got to our first Pac-12 team, Utah, and part of that is, some of the other ones in front of them lost, or at least one of them that we'll get to here in a minute. But the Pac-12 is kind of a funny league. It seems better than it was last year, top to bottom, but still nobody's really stepping up. And
Right.
To get into that top 10, top 8 region that you kind of need to be at eventually to really make a run at it. At the end of the year. But right now we got them at 13.
Yeah, if you watch the Pac-12, you're now a Utah fan because it appears that Utah is the best chance to be a playoff team out of
Probably
the Pac-12.
so. Yeah. And of course, a lot of people predicted that.
Right.
At the beginning of the year. 15.
Auburn.
Yeah, Auburn.
This is one of the more talented teams. You know, as we get closer to that, you know, the end of our top 25, this team's got an NFL defensive line, but they got a freshman quarterback, Bo Nix, who has been up and down. But they had the marquee win early in the season against Oregon, and you know, Oregon preseason was, you know, projected to be a top 10 team or a playoff contender. But this last week, Auburn played Tulane and struggled a little bit in the beginning, but they ended up pulling away and winning 24-6, which I think the line was 18 points. They won by 18, so we got them at number 14.
Next, we got Oregon, the second Pac-12 team, and boy, did they bounce back this week.
Right.
In a big way. With defeating Nevada, and it wasn't close either. And I like Nevada a lot. You know,
right.
going into this last week, I had no clue it was going to be that big of a blowout.
Yeah, I mean, Nevada goes. I think they beat Purdue the week before.
Yes.
And Purdue came out this week looking pretty good. They beat Vandy 45-20, and Oregon absolutely blew the doors off of Nevada. I think it was 66-7. They got an offense, and they got a very athletic defense. If they wouldn't have lost that game to Auburn, I think they would very much be in the playoff race, and they still might be. They gotta win their conference and probably go undefeated.
Yeah, they'll have to go undefeated.
They're a really good
without
team.
a doubt. On the other side of the spectrum, at 17, we got Michigan State, which is
definitely
the antithesis to Oregon. they're maybe the best defense.
One of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the nation, defensive line or maybe front seven's definitely up there.
Yeah.
And the Big Ten just coming through with defense again.
Like we were saying, Wisconsin hasn't given up a point. Michigan State has held their opponents. They still have not given up. They're in negative rushing yards given up. The first week they gave up like 78, negative 78 rushing yards to the other team, and last year they gave up 63. So they're still in that negative bracket.
Yeah, I love this time of year where you have these weird stats that kind of come up, but then you're like hoping they can somehow keep it going. You know, don't let them get positive yards.
Yeah.
Or see how long that can go, or how long, say, Wisconsin can keep somebody from scoring.
But keep an eye out on Willikis for Michigan State. He's an absolute beast.
It seemed like we're in the Big Ten living here, because now we got Iowa. Speaking of defense, another great defensive team.
At least what we've seen, yeah.
They just pretty much destroyed Rutgers, and
30-0.
the big game this week, or one of them, is Iowa at Iowa State.
The Cy-Hawk rivalry.
I like Iowa a lot. I like them a lot in that game. We'll get to that another video this week as far as lines and point spread and sort of that, because I haven't even looked at the line yet. I'm assuming
Iowa State's actually the favorite, but it is at Iowa State.
Wow. Okay.
And,
well, we'll talk about that later, but as of right now, we got them at 18, and they definitely deserve to be there, and they look like they're on the move. A new entry in our top 25. This is another one of the surprise teams.
Right.
Maryland. McFarland, their running back.
Anthony McFarland.
Yeah, just, I don't know. He only had like 12 rushes, and, he looked like Saquon Barkley yesterday in Dallas. But, it's like 12, 13 yards a carry or something like that.
Yeah, we hinted at this during our Pick'em video. The game that was between Syracuse and Maryland, we felt like was an important game, kind of going forward.
Right.
And we felt like the winner of that game was going to be in our top 25. Well, Maryland didn't just win. What was the score? 66-20 or something?
It was impressive. I like Maryland a lot, and now I know it's easy to overreact. 2 weeks into it, but you're starting to see a trend with these guys that people can't stop them. And I know as they start getting into the Big Ten schedule and they start playing Michigan, Michigan State,
defenses.
Iowa, Wisconsin, some of these other defenses, it's going to slow down. But you know what? They may still score 40 on you. So
and they seem to be clicking right now.
Yeah, they do.
they're moving the ball up and down the field on whoever they play. So
up next, we got our other one-loss team, Washington, and they really did take a big drop. But when you lose and you lose at home, even though we know the game didn't end till 1:20 in the morning Pacific Standard Time.
Right.
But, hey, they had to play it and they finished it. But we dropped them quite a bit. I think last week we had them maybe at a 12 or 13, but. I still think they're definitely top 25. They're definitely still a good, they control their destiny, but I would say they do. I wouldn't say they totally control it because Cal beat them, but if they went out, hey, they may have a shot.
Right.
Speaking of one-loss teams, this is where A&M, this is kind of the one-loss category here. A&M, Texas A&M dropped to 21 here. Again, we still think they're can make some noise in the SEC. I don't know how much noise they're going to make, but they lost to the number one team in the nation at their house, so you got to take that. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Back to the Pac-12. There's a lot of Pac-12s here in the backside of this. Washington State, Leach has got another quarterback. Nothing's changed there. Of course, they totally destroyed Northern Colorado, and as you would expect they would. And they moved up a couple slots on our top 25.
Yeah, I guess you can kind of throw them into that. We were talking about earlier, it seems like Oklahoma and Ohio State always reload at quarterback. Washington State's the same thing. I mean,
yeah, they really do.
I
think Leach is doing better now than when he was at Tech.
Yeah.
Tech, they had some really good ones, but some of these guys they have now are even getting to the next level and producing in the NFL, which they didn't have much of that back in the early 2000s with Leach at Tech.
Yeah, and I mean, Ohio State and Oklahoma obviously get the highly recruited quarterbacks. Washington State's getting these guys from places that you never even knew, where they came from, and then all of a sudden they're coming out, throwing, tons of touchdowns, and the offense is just absolutely explosive.
Yeah, he's great at finding, especially transfers, and find them a new home.
And I feel like he's been a better defensive coach as of late.
Yeah,
too.
definitely.
His defenses have been better with Washington State, so he's a great coach. What can you say?
Back to the ACC, and we got Virginia. And you know what? The Cavaliers deserve to be on here because they've looked really strong. I know they haven't really played a whole lot. Well, they beat William and Mary this last week, but they beat them really well. And, hey, in the ACC right now, they got as good a shot as anybody outside of Clemson.
Right.
I mean, you could just say, they may be the second best team in the ACC. They probably are. Because with Syracuse, taking a step down, and Miami and Florida State. I mean,
North Carolina too. They're looking.
Yeah, North Carolina. Okay. You don't forget about them. Speaking of them, they're next on our top 25.
Yeah, this was a.
I got Virginia ahead of them because the whole freshman quarterback deal. Outside of if it was Patrick Mahomes or somebody, it's hard to win long term. When you get a freshman quarterback, I'm not saying it's impossible because it happens, but it's harder to do, and that's I think might hold them back a little bit as they.
Yeah, and I think I really like Bryce Perkins at Virginia, their quarterback. I mean, they're a gritty team. I mean, they're one of those teams, they find a way to win, if that makes sense. That's really North Carolina's MO this season. We had kind of some lower expectations on North Carolina coming into this season. You got a new, Mac Brown. He's obviously a Hall of Fame national title coach, but he's new at North Carolina, at least this stint with them. And
20 years later.
And you didn't think that they really had the recruiting and all that.
Yeah, he's on his way to Coach of the Year if he can keep it up.
I mean, you start off the season,
doubt, just because everybody has a lot of love for him anyway.
Yeah, they're 2-0 now, so it's impressive.
25 rounded out. We got Cal, and that's 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
They beat them. What? They beat them? Yeah, they beat them last year at Cal. This was on the road. This is the game that got delayed with the thunderstorms. It was delayed over 2.5 hours.
Right.
And so if you're on the East Coast watching that game, it was over with at almost 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah.
if you're a Cal fan, you got to see them win. I believe they won on a last-second field goal. There wasn't hardly anybody at the game, though, the way I understand it.
Yeah,
Only the hardcore fans.
It was a pretty weird game.
Very strange game.
But
that wraps it up, guys.
great defense. So.
You know, there's some other teams. It's really hard filling in the last 5 slots. Other ones that, you know, we definitely considered was USC. You know, is it Slovis? Yeah. Slovis, their freshman quarterback.
Keon Slovis.
Yeah, he played very impressively, you know, for a freshman.
Beating Stanford.
And there's a lot of teams like that, you know. Even
Oklahoma State.
Oklahoma State, Indiana. You know, we're going to know more about Indiana this week. They play Ohio State at Indiana. Could be an upset alert. You never know. Probably not, but who knows?
Kentucky.
Iowa State, which we initially dropped out after their they barely beat Northern Iowa, and we're like, you know.
But they didn't have a chance to redeem themselves this week.
Right. So you know they're right there, and Hawaii. I don't know. Did you say that? Hawaii definitely.
And I said Kentucky.
Kentucky.
They beat Florida last year, and they're about to go on they get to play Florida at home this week, and I think Florida's an 8.5-point favorite. That's it. That's a very winnable game for
this
Kentucky.
May settle down a little bit, especially on the backside, because a lot of this is going to start panning out, especially as we get into conference play, and you know the teams that are winning, then they're going to entrench themselves and start moving up, and you're going to have the upset here and there. But right now, it's just there's a lot going on because we really don't know where we're at. You know, 2 weeks into it, we kind of getting an idea, but still not exactly sure. Well, guys, hey, subscribe, like, share. We appreciate you visiting with us, and anyways, we'll be doing some other videos this week, so hit the little bell, the notification, and we'll be talking to you. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.